This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazoff.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Obama's True Legacy: How He Transformed America. There's a reason why Mike Huckabee calls it a ferocious and chilling read. Order it now at Amazon.com or at FrontPageMag.com.
Thank you for joining the Glazoff Gang. I'm Michael Lauber, tonight sitting in for Dr. Jamie Glazoff. And Jamie, I want to thank you for the opportunity once again to guest host your wonderful program here. To our audience, this is a fan-generated program. I'd like to remind you that the only way that Jamie's able to bring you the guests and the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear is by generous contributions from viewers like you. And you can do that by going to jamieglazoff.com. Make a donation. Help Jamie in all his efforts to bring you the guests, the news, the stories that you're not going to see on the mainstream media, like our guest tonight, Kelly Walker. Now, many of you are probably familiar with Kelly, even if you don't recognize his name. He's one of the brave parents that stood up at the school boards and at city council fighting this battle. Now, those parents still have not been made whole after Biden's DOJ and Merrick Garland went after them mercilessly, put them on lists, went after debanked many of them, but they led this assault on parents that were concerned and just wanted to raise attention, do their civic duty, and fight back against the tyranny, both during COVID, during these lockdowns, the LGBTQ agenda nonsense in the schools. But Kelly's been one of the parents that's been at that forefront. I want him to tell his story of what happened with him and his family originally, but also get into what's happening now with our current DOJ and Pam Bondi and the effort to make these parents whole again. So Kelly, thank you for joining us tonight on the Glazoff Gang. If you could give our audience a brief introduction of who you are, and then I want to dig right into exactly what happened to you and all the other parents.
Hey, Michael, thanks so much, and great to be here. And thank you, Dr. Glazoff, for giving me the opportunity to be a guest through your co-hosting. And yeah, there's quite a story behind this. I'm going to kind of give you the short version so we can focus mainly on what's happening today. But to make a long story short, you covered a lot of it. School parents started standing up and saying something's wrong in our schools. This primarily started happening really around 2021 with COVID. I think having kids home doing distance learning really helped the parents to see what was being taught. Earlier than CRT, transgenderism, and other issues, however, were the COVID policies. These policies were unscientific. They were based on school districts getting funding from the CDC, and they were driving kids to suicide. The mental health crisis that it engendered is very well documented. And we at the time had a coffee shop in Tucson, Arizona. I was working in marketing, advertising, writing, those different types of things. And parents started coming to us and telling us what was happening with the kids. We have 5 kids. We had a couple of them at that point that had been in the school district, but we never put them back in after the COVID shutdown of schools because we didn't like what was happening. So among other things, our coffee shop became a refuge for people that had common sense. I started FreedomTalk back then in about 2021, and we were giving a voice to people. And back in 2020, September 2020, I was arrested when I went to a Pima County Board of Supervisors meeting at the public comment period to complain that the county had purposely, deliberately, and fraudulently portrayed our coffee shop as out of compliance with the COVID, what do you call it? The
COVID tyranny.
Yeah, the COVID tyranny. And I was going to say the COVID resolution, which we weren't. We passed every inspection. So I found myself getting arrested on television. And the next day after that, people were lined up out the door coming to see, because this was early on and nobody was standing up, certainly not in Southern Arizona. So flash forward a year, because people saw that, we became like the Green Dragon Tavern or the coffee shop during the revolutionary times where the patriots would get together, And I got arrested again almost a year later. I believe it was September 2nd of 2021, because a local father had called me and asked me to sit in an office meeting with him, witness what he was going through and help him. And I ended up calling some authorities and trying to get him help. That whole story is on realfreedomtalk.com. But what I found out later was, oh gosh, that story is, I mean, I could spend this whole time just talking about it. Needless to say, I was politically targeted. There were three of us dads in the office. The others were basically let go with a slap on the wrist, but they sentenced me to 100 days in jail and
Wow.
almost $10,000 in fines for misdemeanor three trespassing, which weren't even guilty of that. I
Yeah.
found out later, as I was looking into this, that this was a product of being targeted by Merrick Garland's DOJ. I may well have been the first parent targeted. And all of that story, again, is at realfreedomtalk.com. But I decided I wasn't going to go to jail. They illegally took the money out of our Tucson home sale. We're in Tennessee now. But I decided, very much like John Hancock and Samuel Adams, that I was going to defy that warrant because they're the criminals, not me. And instead, I started writing letters to congressmen. I started going to Washington, D.C. Flash forward a bit, I've done a lot of work in that. And instead of focusing on my case and appealing, which I decided also not to do that because it would just cause further economic damage to my family, I
Yeah.
really took this up for the nation, and I willingly knew I was going to be a target. I laid aside any, well, not that we could have really afforded to sue, but I just purposely laid it aside. My wife and I did, because we said somebody's got to help these parents. Somebody's got to help the country. We have to make this right. So, gosh, I think it's been 8 or 9 months ago, probably. Actress and author and education advocate Sam Sorbo and I founded Parents Demanding Justice Alliance. We have several members, including Alex Newman, Seek Smith, who's the founder of Mom Army and Dad Army, several others. All the major parenting groups are allied with us. We've gone to Washington, D.C. several times. And now that Trump's in office, we have been working very, very hard to get some restitution for these parents. We've drafted an EO that has made it to the White House. We've met with Ed Martin of the Weaponization Working Group. We've met with Vince Haley in the West Wing, the president's domestic policy advisor. We've communicated with Pam Bondi, with Harmeet Dillon, and a whole lot of others. So we're trying to make this progress. And if you go to realfreedomtalk.com and go to that Parents Demanding Justice Alliance page, you'll see multiple shows that we've been on, papers that we've written, articles. We have everything documented. We have a dossier of over 60 parents who were targeted by a weaponized DOJ. And look, we have the smoking guns. Merrick
Yeah.
Garland knew that DOJ lawyers told him, you have no constitutional basis to go after these parents. He instructed them to look for a federal hook. He and Lisa Monaco went ahead and did it anyway. It was wrong. It destroyed lives. But here's the problem. And I just want to put this frankly, and I'm reflecting what a lot of parents are starting to feel, because we came into this thinking, okay, Donald Trump's back in office. We've got a new administration. Kash Patel, for example, promised Senator Josh Hawley during his confirmation hearings that he was going to take care of this issue. There have been a lot of
Hmm.
promises, but nothing's really been done. We've had a lot of meetings and, one letter from Ed Martin for one of the parents. And I was in Washington, D.C. in October, and we were told that Pam Bondi was going to have a hearing. And if she couldn't, she got called away on an emergency, Todd Blanche would be there. But we would have some parents be able to get up and testify and tell their stories so that Pam and the general public, the media, would see this. We could
Yeah.
document it. Sam was going to speak. I was going to speak. We were looking forward to this. Then we found out it abruptly got canceled, and they blamed the lockdowns. However, I was in Washington, D.C. October 7th at the Senate hearing when Pam Bondi testified to the Senate and basically said, this problem's been taken care of. The weaponization's over. It's not happening anymore. And during that same meeting later on, Senator Hawley, who we've been in touch with, he's been a great ally in this cause, got
Sure.
up there and said, look, this isn't over. These parents are still suffering. They don't have the funds or the know-how to defend themselves. We have to end this. So we're in this place right now where the last we've heard from Pam Bondi is saying, well, we've taken care of this. Well, no, we haven't, because none of these parents have been made whole. What we want for them in the executive order is, we want for a ceremony at the White House honoring these parents for their bravery and courage to stand up and do the right thing. We want some investigations. We want people held accountable. But we
Yeah.
also want an executive order that provides restitution for these parents. And we know who they are. We know their stories. We have it all documented in this dossier. And we're not looking for, I say there's a difference between restitution and reparations. Reparations are this nebulous concept that one class of people's been harmed and we're going to pay them for it. Now
Yeah.
that's bullcrap. You know, we're looking at people whose lives were destroyed. They lost jobs, they lost businesses, they had huge legal fees, all kinds of damages. And that's happened to my family. We lost everything. I mean, we were full on attacked. Why is this a federal issue? Why do we need the president to step in? Because it was all masterminded by Biden's DOJ. So I
Bingo.
like to say, if somebody hires a hitman, let's say I don't know, Hillary Clinton hires a hitman, right?
Right.
To
And that
take
never
somebody out.
happens.
No,
That never
I know
happens.
that's a stretch, right? But if this person kills somebody, is it the hitman that's guilty? Yes. But is Hillary Clinton guilty? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But she's the mastermind. She's ultimately the most responsible. So, and what's very interesting is that just recently, as you saw in the news, um, the Trump lawyers, including my
Hmm.
friend Rudy Giuliani, were pardoned, which is great. But I found out later, all of those are for state charges. And so the states are saying, well, we're going to ignore that. However, the DOJ is trying to say, well, it's because it's over elections and that is a federal issue. We've asked for pardons and knowing that the president can't technically pardon state pardons. However,
Yeah.
we've approached it from the standpoint of because the DOJ orchestrated this, because this October 4th memo came out from Merrick Garland designating federal resources under the Patriot Act to put a threat tag on parents to
Hmm.
literally treat parents and label them as domestic terrorists, that it is a federal issue. And just because there were no federal indictments doesn't mean it wasn't a federal issue because they worked very closely, and we have the receipts in this.
Yeah.
Americans for Liberty put out a great report. We've put out information to show that these local authorities, state authorities, were acting on behalf of the feds. So the
Yeah.
feds put on a local mask, but it really is their responsibility. So here we are. We've worked tirelessly. We've worked hard. We've done all the homework. And frankly, we know some people in the administration care. They want to do the right thing. But there are a few problems. One problem is they're absolutely swamped with requests because the Biden administration did so many wrong things, made such a mess, they have to clean it up. We get that.
Yeah.
We've offered to volunteer to help. We'll do paralegal, we'll do research, whatever we need to do, we'll do it. But the other problem that really concerns me is that we don't think President Trump knows or realizes that these parents haven't been taken care of. And we're starting to get together with other groups, like some of the J6ers who are still being persecuted, whose pardons
Yes.
have been ignored, like abortion protesters, like people, well, Tina Peters and our friend Mike Lindell. I've done communications work for Mike Lindell and still have a great relationship with him.
Hmm.
They haven't, they've not been helped. And then to add insult to injury, we had this provision in the spending bill that stopped the shutdown of the government, giving this just clear violation of the 14th Amendment, giving senators this special legal privilege that they can sue for every infraction of their phones being tapped or some other way
Yes.
the DOJ trampled on their rights, and there's no immunity offered to the feds. While the rest of us out here outside the castle, they pulled up the drawbridge and we're on our own. We're out of luck. How much
Well,
money
yeah.
has Mike Lindell had to raise? And we've all donated to him. How much money has he had to raise just to stay alive? But suddenly, okay, Lindsey Graham's phone, he finds out his phone got tapped, and suddenly now it's an emergency. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and at $500,000 per infraction, which is also insane. But that's really the underlying problem, is we know for a fact this was all directed by Merrick Garland at Biden or whoever was pulling Biden's strings behest to use federal resources to target and harass parents to silence your voices. They didn't like that parents were seeing what their kids were learning on in school and furious about that and going to their school boards. They didn't like other parents like you that were looking at this ridiculous COVID policy that wasn't meant to protect Americans or any of this other nonsense. It was meant for control. These were laws that weren't protecting anybody, measures that didn't accomplish anything, mask mandates, other sort of just harassment nonsense. And we know that the Biden regime also got federal law enforcement involved in this just to make people's lives difficult, essentially, to harass anybody that was brave enough to speak out and stand up to their agenda. And a lot of you suffered legal repercussions because of it. Now, the parents that suffered under this, again, totally unlawful act from the Biden regime, they deserve to be made whole. A lot of them, like your $10,000 fine, jail time, other costs associated with any legal fees, being forced to move across the country, dealing with all these other disruptions.
You read
Yeah,
these stories in the dossier, it's absolutely shocking. You can hardly believe this happened in the United States of America. Dinesh D'Souza put out Police State. It's exactly like that. And everybody knows about J6, and we know about some of the people. We know about Tina Peters being in prison, which she should be
sure.
out by now, but
Yeah,
a few people know about these parents. And
sure.
but Michael, I want to read you a little bit because I penned a letter. We've had people signing on, and I haven't really totally gotten it out yet, but David Summerall from StopHate.com has signed on. Seek Smith, founder of Mama Marine Dad Army, Joe Hoft, brother of Jim Hoft, he signed on. I really haven't showed it to many people yet, but I want to read you a part of this letter because I think it will say clearly what the problem is and how it's a danger to our republic, what's happening. And I'll tell you, when you start hearing people like John Solomon, Steve Bannon, gosh, who was it the other day? Christina Bobb saying
Hmm.
the government isn't helping the people. They're not fulfilling their promises.
Yeah.
Then it's actually a real problem. I'm not just making this up. And then we have parents coming to us. Like one of the parents said, "I'm never voting Republican again. I'm going to see if the Democrats will help." We have people saying they're going to launch lawsuits. I mean, this is a catastrophe that's
Well,
brewing, and people need to
yeah.
know about it.
And it seems like such an easy win for the Trump administration, which is why I kind of don't understand they're taking this position that, oh no, we stopped the harassment, which again is not entirely true, especially in a lot of these blue states. They're continuing to harass a lot of these parents that stood up or continuing to pursue them legally.
Yeah.
But the fact again, like you are entitled some sort of restitution to be made whole again. You know, and again, no one's blaming the Trump administration for what happened to everybody illegally, but the fact that they won't want to are
We
continuing
just
not to address
we,
it now,
we
that's
just
where the
think
problem is.
we just think the president doesn't know that maybe some of his advisors are saying things that have been handled that haven't. And I know how the parents feel about this, and it's not a good look. President Trump is losing his base. And you're right. It is like Steve Bannon called it like a softball pitch. And
Yes.
he asked Sam Sorbo, why hasn't this been done? This should have been done already. And we've had the excuse of, well, the shutdown's in place, and now we're getting other excuses. Oh, it takes time. We're talking about some very, very easy things. This executive order is very doable. We were promised a public apology issued by Pam Bondi. For Pete's sake, I drafted it to help her get a start. Said you can edit it. We were promised that. Hasn't come. I said, you know why this is so important to get this apology? Because so many of these families have lost family connections, friendships, jobs.
Yes.
This is very important. My oldest son hasn't talked to me in 3 years because, and I've been a good father. We've been very close, but these false media reports, the government designation of me as a terrorist, people with bad motives use that against me. So yeah, okay, you don't have time to issue an apology that I just penned for you. You don't have time for that, but you can let George Santos out, right? You can
Yeah.
help. You can appear on camera with Benny Johnson when his family gets threatened. And Benny should have had that. But Pam Bondi just got right on that for him. I've had death threats for 3 years and nobody's helped me. Nobody.
No.
And I
No.
get it. I don't have the following of Benny Johnson. And again, I don't begrudge him that. But we seem to have this double standard. And I wrote an article in a recent, I think it was the September Freedom Talk magazine, which I founded and I'm the editor in chief for. And the title of the article was, "Is Justice Only for the Well-Connected?" Because it sure seems like that. And I hate to
Yeah.
say it because we all voted for Trump. We all support this administration. But too much time has gone by. And it's too little too late right now. And so I'm going to
Well,
read you part of this letter. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and then we'll get to the letter then. But yeah, I mean, again, it's like seems like such an easy victory, something that there would be broad support for, and also again, it helps with the messaging. Again, it reminds people about all the corruption that they went through in the last 4 years and what happened with the United States turning into a police state during COVID. I think a lot of people, especially normies, have gotten past that. They forgot about all these stupid things that were done, from pouring sand in skate parks and bolting boards onto basketball hoops. It wasn't safe for you to go out and walk on the beach in the morning, or some mystery person would get COVID. All the other just stupid things that went on.
Yeah.
People need a reminder of what what can happen when you weaponize government against the American people.
Well, yeah, and so we've had Representatives Andy Ogles and Andy Biggs with support from Eli Crane, Jim Jordan, Paul Gosar. We held a July 15th press conference at the Capitol building. Representative Andy Ogles wrote a letter to Kash Patel urging him to investigate this right away. I know Kash cares about it. I have his phone number. I also know he's swamped. But
Yeah.
we've had Senator Hawley in that Senate hearing. He told Pam Bondi, we need immediately a special prosecutor to help these parents, because people like this parent in Pennsylvania, they're trying to take away his job. And he contacted me in a panic and said, Kelly, I need help because, yeah, Ed Martin wrote this letter, but now they think I made it up because nothing's happened. So I got on the phone
Oh, wow.
with some congressmen, and I contacted Senator Hawley through Eric Metaxas. I said, we got to help him. So we at least got some posts out from congressmen to support him, but he's still waiting. And you can imagine, and I say to him, hey, you've experienced everything. You're afraid that everything that happened to me will happen to you. So we're downstream of it, trying to rebuild our lives. I'm 56, and my wife and I, it's like we're newlyweds, because everything, home gone, savings gone, everything, right? Okay, so let me read a little from this letter. And look, I want to say this too. Like, we don't want to be hostile toward the administration. We don't want to be adversarial. We don't want to build walls up. But it's come to the point where enough excuses. Like, when we're doing the work for them, we're offering to even come up and help. I'll come stay in Washington, D.C. and help. And when we're seeing others get preferential treatment, it's time to say, so what we're going to do is write this letter, and we're going to demand an audience with President Trump, because we don't think he knows what's going on. So, dear Mr. President, with respect, we write on behalf of Parents Demanding Justice Alliance, PDJA, and in solidarity with the many Americans persecuted under Merrick Garland's corrupt DOJ, to urgently seek decisive and immediate action for those targeted. These citizens were pursued and prosecuted with stunning speed. Yet, even under your leadership, there is a growing public perception that justice is delivered swiftly for the powerful, but delayed for ordinary Americans. An imbalance that could have profound consequences in the midterms. So part of this letter is, we want President to know that we do not want to lose the midterms, and we see this as a very important issue. So we write this out of concern for our country. Ordinary citizens, parents, election integrity advocates, J6 defendants, peaceful dissenters, pastors, all saw their lives swiftly and deliberately shattered. Years later, they still wait, as justice is slow-walked, if at all. Parents are the central group that intersects with every other category, the most vulnerable to abuse and the most consistently ignored. This injustice endures even as overwhelming evidence confirms that the Garland memo branding parents as domestic terrorists, reflecting other slurs like election deniers and insurrectionists, was politically coordinated by the Biden White House. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Mr. President, we fear you may not be aware of how severely this issue is being mishandled, and how boldly your own executive order on government targeting is being disregarded. The executive order specifically on ending K through 12 indoctrination, which talks about this targeting of parents. Those responsible now act as if your authority can be mocked and ignored without consequence. So the people like John Carruth, Vail superintendent, who put my family through a BS trial, attacked us with lies, went to the media, spun lies on the Jussie Smollett level, who, by the way, lied about the bloody t-shirts. Yeah, that was John Carruth, who has fired a teacher for going and complaining about that. They do this with impunity. They don't believe that anything's going to happen. And if they don't, they're going to be emboldened, and they're going to do it worse.
Well, yeah, and this is unfortunately is not the only subject or issue that we're seeing like this with the Trump administration. Look at the DEI at a lot of these colleges. I mean, there's a video of the president of a school in Florida, I can't remember, I think it's Florida Tech, laughing about it, laughing all the way to the bank that he's getting, I think it's 67 or $68 million between the administration and the state. And he told them that he got rid of the DEI program, but in reality, he just changed the name and he laughs all the way to the bank. We know what's going on with other colleges, schools, businesses, contractors. They're continuing to do what they're supposed to have stopped. They just changed the name and they laugh about it because they know there is no follow up right now from the administration. I get it. They do have a lot of things they're pursuing. And if Pam Bondi, were out there filing charges left and right against every deep state monster out there, I'd be a little more forgiving. But the problem is they're not really succeeding on that, and then they're failing on issues like this.
Well, and I've heard the explanation that, boy, they want to prepare the cases. They want to make sure that they really get them, and they don't, but we're talking about simple things like sending letters to people like John Carruth saying, save your files. We're going to FOIA you. We're going to subpoena you. Even Senator Hawley, one of his staff, said, we need to get John Carruth up to DC and grill him in front of the Senate for what he did. Even simple things aren't being done. And, I know Harmeet Dillon needs lawyers, for example. We've got some lawyers in Parents Demanding Justice Alliance who will volunteer their time. And again, I don't want to be confrontational, but there's absolutely no reason anymore why we can't do this. And I'll tell you, one of these school parents texted me today. They text me, they get to me all the time. We've had 3 parents already commit suicide out of hopelessness. Okay. 3
Thanks.
that we know of. And I'm sure there are more. There's kids as well who've committed suicide because of all this. But this parent said to me, Kelly, I thought the Biden administration was bad, and they were, but I'm starting to feel like the Trump administration is worse because at least with the Biden administration, I didn't expect them to do the right thing. That is a sad commentary right now. And
It really is.
pains me that anybody would feel that way right now because we all look to Trump and the administration with high hopes. But right now, we've got, like I said, Christina Bobb, Emerald Robinson, Steve Bannon, John Solomon, a whole lot of others saying, where's the action? Where's the action? And you know what it feels like? Just like David Summerall from Stop Hate, when I was talking to him about this, he said it feels like there's this golden age and there's this castle in DC and they just closed the drawbridge and none of the rest of us are invited. That's how it feels.
Well, and they're going to
reality.
Well, and at some point they're going to have to look at the reality of this situation because it is these parents all over the country, but it's also all these J6 defendants need restitution, especially the ones that sat in jail for years.
Yeah.
Or ones that were like Derek that were forced to take a plea deal, like Derek Evans. He had to do 90 days in jail away from his family. And people may scoff at that and say, oh, it's not that bad. Well, that's a huge amount of cost. Well, he's not able to work, provide income, made things extremely difficult on them. And it's also all the money he spent fighting these charges, fighting the feds with this just nonsense. Again, all these people deserve to be made whole. I know that it isn't the Trump administration's fault that this happened, but it is their obligation to make sure that these previous actions are corrected.
Yeah, or like Felicia Conold in Tucson, who will get a job. I guess she's a veterinary tech, and then she'll lose it because this stuff's still on her record and she's still demonized. They should have gotten a pardon of innocence, in my opinion. But how did I meet Felicia? Well, we had our coffee shop. This guy I didn't know at the time, David Summerall, called us up and said, "Hey, could we have a baby shower at your coffee shop for this J6 mom?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure. Bring her on in." I met this very opinionated guy, and I was like, "Who is this?" Turned out to be Grant Stinchfield. We've been friends ever since. And so we had this baby shower for Felicia. There was FBI in there. We knew it. They stand out like a sore thumb.
Unbelievable.
Shorts or whatever. But flash forward 2.5 years, we're in Tennessee. We find out that Felicia's now going to be going to prison. She's a single mom. Her little boy is 2.5 years old. Her mother wanted to take her child for CPS because she's on the left. And she had, so without thinking, and here we are in the wake of devastation of all this that happened to us. We couldn't afford it, but we put plane tickets on a credit card. My wife flew back from Tucson to Tennessee, got signed over power of attorney, and Felicia literally driving from Arizona up to DC, dropped Henry off. We were ready to foster Henry, take him into our house with our kids for 4 years because that's what her sentence was. Thank God, when she read a letter about how she feels about her little boy, the judge showed some leniency, and it turned out being, I believe it was about 3 months. But this is the kind of connections we have. This is how much Americans love and care for one another. I wasn't at the January 6th event, but
Yeah.
somebody reaches out and they have a need. Look, and she was innocent. All she did was walk around, but innocent or guilty,
As
it doesn't
yeah,
matter.
most
Like
of them.
her child would probably be in the system right now, and who knows where he would be. And instead, he still talks about his other family. He still looks at me as like a dad, like he's trying to call me dad, and I'm like, wow, this is
Yeah.
crazy. But there are people like that all over the country, and they're still waiting because look, if we can't take first of all Christianity, like we're supposed to be helping and supporting the fatherless and widows. I mean, hello. And but
Yeah.
second of all, in our founding documents, we the people, like James Madison said, the people are the only fountain of power. Government is only there to represent us. So obviously, it's gone far past that. It's its own little kingdom, and the abuses are multiplying. But if we can't take care of our own when the abuses have been so egregious, look, everybody knows what the Biden administration did.
Yes.
But the point is, it's not just senators and congressmen who matter or people with money. Elon Musk, they rolled out the red carpet for him. Bondi was right on that. Oh, if anybody scratches one of his cars or torches a dealership, we're gonna get right on it. We're gonna be after them. Okay, Elon
Yeah.
Musk, welcome to the party. The rest of us have
Well,
been. One of our parents, who's now newly being targeted, her car was vandalized. Pam Bondi, where are you? She doesn't have
yeah.
billions, but she matters. You
Well,
know.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I understand the need to act immediately, like with the Tesla terrorism and stuff like that. But a lot of the others, it does seem to be favoritism that if you're powerful, if you're popular or whatever, they'll get to your concern immediately. But if you're somebody that doesn't have that or you're no longer, I don't know, useful, then there doesn't seem to be any concern about it or any willingness to work with you and at least, at the very least, communicate. I'm sure if you and the other parents were told, hey, from now till the end of the year, we have to get these arrests done on all the Russiagate case, clocks running on that. And I think most of our audience probably doesn't know this, but a lot of the Russiagate stuff, they only have about 2 more months to make arrests before the statute of limitations runs out. So if they were saying, hey, we're going to get on this January 1st, this is going to be our priority, at least you'd have some kind of information instead of just feeling like you're put off and it doesn't matter.
Well, and I've tried to be patient. I've tried to, Sam and I try to be that bridge, and we've tried to say, be patient. They have a lot on their plates. Look, we get that. We get that. And as important as the Russiagate and all those issues are,
Yeah,
the American people were put in harm's way. People were killed. People were deprived of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, deprived of property. And it's the government's job to protect those things, not to take them away. So I get it. The Trump administration didn't do those things personally, but they still sit in those offices. And
correct.
this needs to happen. I think no matter how busy you are, an executive order would take a day, and we'll do the
Yeah,
footwork, we'll do the work. So we're talking about forming a citizens council as a permanent feature where some leading citizens are going to step forward and say, we want to have some accountability. We want to have an audience with the president, and we want an independent citizens group that is going to be a watchdog because look, lawfare, we have no rule of law. We have rule by law. It's out of control. We have members of Congress who are doing insider trading. It's corrupt, like we call it the swamp. So
yeah,
we're going to show up and we're going to demand accountability. And I don't care that I have no money, I don't have a huge following, that some of us are just ordinary average people. These are the people who founded this country. They got to a point where they said, you know what? Working with the system, it's not getting us anywhere. The legal challenges of the British government, appealing to their better nature, none of it's working. So they had to get to a point where they said, we're going to get involved. And Samuel Adams said something fantastic. If ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin. And I looked at that for years as the Biden administration. Unfortunately, I'm looking at it now as the uniparty. And I'm looking at people, I'm not going to name names, and I can't judge people's motives. In some cases, it's pretty obvious, but there are people supposedly on our side that are Republicans who are vain aspiring men. And now you have members of Congress saying this just outright. Some
Yeah.
members of Congress tell me privately, yeah, I'll tell you who's bought out by China, and who's uh, Representative Eli Crane. He's a good friend. He tells me all the time, like he posts it right online. He says most of these people are just in it for themselves. It's gone. It's gotten to a point where our government has spun so out of control. It's time for responsible, experienced patriots to step in and say, we're not doing this anymore. It
Yeah.
was 264 years between Magna Carta and the signing of the Declaration, and it's been just almost 250 years from the Declaration to now. And it seems like we need a revolution. And I don't mean something like you see from the left with burning cities. What I mean is the literal interpretation of that word, which is a turning back. We need to turn
Yes.
back to the first principles of our country. And it's high time. And just as we did in Magna Carta, just when the king was abusing common law, threatening the look, America is the great experiment, but we have our roots going back hundreds, if not thousands of years to this Anglosphere heritage of freedom.
Hmm.
It seems like it's time again for the people to step forward and say, this is not acceptable. We consider these truths to be self-evident. And I find myself reading the Declaration of Independence and seeing a lot of common ground with how Americans are feeling today.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's never been a better illustration, a more timely time of this corrupt kleptocracy that we now have running things in DC than this backroom deal to protect Stacy Pliskett and Corey Mills from censure that just happened after releasing the Epstein files. It came out
Yeah.
that Plaskett was literally communicating with Epstein, or as she calls him, her constituent, while during the hearing with Cohen. But the Democrats want to make a deal, so there's some backroom compromise was made to protect her and protect Corey Mills, which I don't understand. I mean, they both did wrongdoing. At the very least, they get censured. There's no real there's no real consequences to that anyway. It's basically like writing a strongly worded letter. But the fact of the matter is, unfortunately, the DC swamp protects its own, and the message that's being sent is, yeah, that's going to continue. And they don't really care about what they've done, what they did in the past, what intel agencies or law enforcement agencies have done in the past. They don't really care if it's done now. That's good enough, and you don't deserve restitution. But hey, we'll do 500,000 per incident and allow the Senate to sue the federal government. And again, don't make no mistake, that's going to be millions and millions of dollars for a lot of the people that were wrapped up in Arctic frost. But again, only for the senators, not for anyone else, not for any other people that were wrapped up in that. And we know for a fact that at least 92 conservative organizations, I've heard as high as 96 now, are wrapped up in that, not to mention hundreds and hundreds of individuals. But they'll protect their own, they'll make a path forward so they can pull 500,000 per incident. But us, the normal plebes out here, they could care less about restoration of what was stolen and correction. Maybe they should also talk about putting some laws or some guardrails in place that might prevent that. I think citizen monitoring groups is one solution. We need one at the FBI. We need one at the CIA, the NSA, and we can have people have security clearance, but they
Yeah.
also need authority to do
Mhm.
something when they're violating the Constitution or violating the rule of law that governs how these law enforcement agencies operate.
President Trump has talked a lot about, and it's been part of his campaign promise to return the power to the people. And what we're seeing is Washington, D.C. is its own little kingdom, little self-interested kingdom. And our many, if not most or almost all of our representatives are self-dealing. They're taking care of themselves. They're enriching themselves. They're playing these games. They're making political deals that we neither want nor often understand. And, Thomas Jefferson said the issue today is the same as it has been throughout all history, whether man shall be allowed to govern himself or be ruled by a small elite. And John Locke, our Constitution, our founding documents were based on John Locke's thoughts. And
Yes.
he wrote, any single man must judge whether circumstances warrant obedience or resistance to the commands of the civil magistrate. We are all qualified, entitled, and morally obligated to evaluate the conduct of our rulers. This political judgment, moreover, is not simply or primarily a right, but like self-preservation, a duty to God. As such, it is a judgment that men cannot part with according to the God of nature. It is the first and foremost of our inalienable rights, without which we can preserve no other. Either Trump makes good on returning the power to the people, or we're going to take it back because we are the government. There's a social contract. And this might sound, unfortunately, what our country was founded on, the founding principles sound, or they're portrayed as seeming extreme today. This country was built on rebellion against tyranny, on
Yeah,
rebellion against systemized oppression. We have seen things, particularly in the past 5 years, that make what the British did to the colonists pale by comparison. How many
agreed.
people lost their businesses, their livelihoods, and their lives due to the COVID nonsense? How many
Yeah,
people have been targeted and arrested? I was arrested. They wanted to throw me in jail for speaking, for talking, for standing up and saying what's right.
yep,
And it's one thing, yes, the people who did this from the Democrat side or uniparty side, whoever they may be, they do need to be held responsible. However,
correct.
I have a duty to my fellow citizens in my country to seek this justice, to not give up, and to hold our rulers accountable. And here's something we've lost, and I'm on my soapbox, right?
Huh.
I'm a 56-year-old man. I get to rant, but uh, here's here's the thing: we have this duty, this right to be the safeguards of our own liberty, and the government has forgotten that they work for us. We don't work for them. So I
Bingo.
go into a school board meeting, starting at the local level. All the board members are above the people. The people ought to be above them, and they ought to be answering to the people. That architecture, that feng shui of authority is very important. I
Yes.
go and I talk to some really great representatives, congressmen, senators. I talk to others, and they act as if it's a privilege for you to be talking to them, a privilege to take up their time. Oh, hell no, it's a privilege for you to talk to me as a citizen. Okay,
Exactly.
especially if I'm one of your constituents. And yes, we're respectful, we respect the office. But don't treat the people who got you into office as if they don't matter, because they are the whole point. The word economy, everything runs on the economy, right? That comes
Hmm.
from the Greek word oikos, which means home. The economy is literally the actions of the home, the building of a home, property, family, all of the things that have been attacked. So our oikos, our economy has been decimated. We got our first home together. We're renting now. Okay, there are worse problems in the world. I get it. Nigerian Christians are being slaughtered. It's genocide. That needs to be
Yeah.
taken care of. But we need to take care of the problems at home. We need to take care of the people at home. We definitely should be in Nigeria. But how much money has gone to Ukraine? How many illegal aliens are being given free stuff?
Yeah.
I,
30
I,
bill.
when we were starting to rebuild after everything had been taken away from me, I had no insurance. I was looking for work. My appendix gave out. Okay. We have $15,000 in medical bills that we can't pay. They're
Wow.
pressing us for it. But if I had walked over the border, broken the law, that would all be taken care of. You
Yeah,
know,
and they'd be writing you a giant check and an EBT card and giving you cash for walking around money too.
and I'm not anti-immigrant. I speak fluent Spanish. I've traveled. I've done humanitarian work. I was a bilingual teacher, my first job out of my bachelor's degree. I love other cultures and languages. However, the border was opened for political and warfare purposes to take down this country. It's the same
Correct.
sort of thing that took down the Roman Empire when there was no restriction on people coming in, and people were coming into the country who didn't have that allegiance, who didn't have that loyalty to the country, who wanted to form their own communities within the United States. We've got problems, but the first thing we need to do to solve those problems is take care of the people who've been abused and boost up that oikos again, restore people, make them whole again. And, you know, people are getting help who have plenty, who have a lot of money, and that's
Yeah.
fine. But we can't be respecters of persons. And the most egregious example of that recently was what the senators did. I think, didn't you tell me that the House is trying to rescind that?
Yeah, the House is trying to get that removed because, yeah, it is unjustified. They don't need this special advantage and these laws to protect them when the regular American people would not be given that same advantage in court or this insane thing to, $500,000 per incident. They're going to find as many incidents as they can, and they're just going to put that money right in their pocket.
It's It's asinine. Like standing up for these parents and just asking for reasonable restitution to make people whole again. Most
Yeah.
people are very supportive of it. I had a few that said, well, why should the taxpayer pay for that? Okay, why the hell should the taxpayer enrich senators eh, who
Well,
got their phones tapped? Like, I get it, it's wrong, it's bad, it's treasonous, but how were you harmed, Lindsey Graham, by that? Why should you get a big bucket of money? You're doing
well,
fine. You're
yeah.
a millionaire, I'm sure. What
Well,
about
the
what about
bottom
these people
line,
out there whose lives have
yeah.
been ruined? Do they not matter?
Well, I mean that's it. That's the bottom line right there. Is the reason the taxpayer is on the hook for this is because the government screwed up before, and you guys do deserve to be made whole again. That's why the taxpayer, unfortunately, has to pick up the tab for errors and illegalities committed under the Biden regime.
Yeah.
But Trump's in office now, so it's their responsibility to take care of the people that were harmed and restore them whole, make them whole again. But also, we need to put some sort of a system in place to make sure this kind of actual weaponization of law enforcement and of government agencies cannot occur again, or this politicization, because that's really what it is. Is they weren't planning on Trump winning in 2024. They didn't think they were ready to kick things into high gear. So this would not have stopped. We already know they were planning on making a huge number of arrests on the J6 community, and I'm sure they had more parents in their crosshairs too. So something has to be done both to restore everyone and to make sure those that violated any laws during this process that they're also held accountable.
Yeah, and in this letter, which I am going to share publicly, an open letter to President Trump, I said, and it's still a draft, some may change, but it says, meanwhile, senators secured for themselves the right under Arctic frost to sue the DOJ for $500,000 per violation with no immunity for federal offenders. If lawmakers deserve such protections, then we, the people, deserve the same. Anything less reinforces the belief that Washington's elites enjoy a separate system of justice in violation of 14th Amendment protections. So, yeah, talking to
Bingo.
David Summerall at Stop Hate, he said, okay, there's our starting support for all the J6 people. And I said, there's the starting point for the targeted Americans. 500,000 per infraction. Watch
Seems
out,
fair to
Elon
me.
Musk, I'm coming because they've
Yeah.
been many. They've been many. And look, that's not why we're doing this. We're not
No.
after this to make a ton of money. It does take money to restore people, and that needs to happen because it was taken away from them unlawfully,
Correct.
unconstitutionally. But the major point is that we want justice in the land. We want the founding principles, what our whole government exists for. And the government has become so self-serving. It's
Yeah.
I was thinking today, these No Kings protests, they're terrible, they're ridiculous.
Yeah.
And yet there is a kernel of truth to it because we're getting tired of seeing the cocktail parties and the openings and the swanky parties and because we're not in that and it feels kind of feudal like we're supposed to appeal to the lords of the land and it's I may deign to give you a boon to help you we're supposed to be an egalitarian society and we've strayed from that and we need to get back to that and we need to do it soon.
Well said. Well, we are almost out of time here. So, is there anything our audience can do right now to help you or to help the other parents? And what is the best place for our audience to find you and follow you online?
Yeah, please go to realfreedomtalk.com. I'd like you to subscribe to Freedom Talk magazine. It's free, and you just sign up. It's real easy. You'll get it each month, and it's going out to about somewhere over 2 million email addresses now, and it's on several shows. I know you guys are partnering in that, but please also
Yep.
consider a donation. Go to the Parents Demanding Justice Alliance page because we're literally putting tires on cars, and we just had to get our CV axle, one of the CV axles replaced. And so we're not building a big empire. We're not funding big positions. We're literally just
Yeah.
doing the work that needs to be done on behalf of the American people. You can also go to givesendgo.com/freedom talk if you'd like to donate that way. But thanks for asking. We're doing
Yeah.
hard work. It's been a huge sacrifice. Sometimes I haven't known how we do it. Like one time
Yeah.
going to DC recently, my flight got delayed twice and I had to throw the family in the minivan and the dented, beat up minivan and fly up to watch. drive up to Washington as quick as we could in the van. So
Yeah, you're not asking for much. It'd just be nice to keep the lights on while you continue to fight and struggle for justice. Well,
and
Kelly.
speaking of the van, fortunately, we don't live in a van down by the river yet, but.
Yeah, but yeah, something doesn't things don't start to turn themselves around soon. Hopefully, that's not a near future possibility.
Yeah.
But Kelly, I do want to thank you for joining us here and thank you for sharing the story. Again, I want to encourage the audience to go to realfreedomtalk.com, sign up for the newsletter and magazine. Again, it's free. You're going to get stories from a lot of people you're familiar with too. There's a lot of people contributing to this magazine, and again, it is a good way to stay informed and again, to support the people that are in the fight alongside you. Jamie, I want to thank you for the opportunity again to host the Glazoff Gang. To Jamie's audience, I want to thank you for joining us today. And also, once again, remind you that this is a fan-generated show. We rely on contributions from viewers like you in order to keep bringing you the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. And you can do that, make a contribution at jamieglazoff.com. Once again, thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see you again here soon.